Hey everyone, welcome to Sunday Night Soul Time. I hope that you're doing well. I hope that you had an incredible weekend, and I'm so happy to be with you tonight. If you've noticed, I haven't been doing Sunday Night Soul Times every Sunday. Just been taking it a little bit easy for myself and making time for my own inner reflection and focusing on some different goals of mine as well. But I'm glad to be with you tonight, and it's hard to believe that we're already like in the middle of August. It's just crazy. Anyway, so tonight I wanted to really talk with you, and it's a big topic, but I'm going to break it down and make it a little bit smaller and hopefully share more about this in the weeks and months ahead. But I've had a lot of questions asked to me about what is going on with this time period, and I'm sure you've been asking it. You might have been doing some reading about it, trying to figure it out, or not. Whatever it is so fine. Many spiritual teachers, many mystics from the beginning of time that have walked the earth at different times have really talked about this time period that we're in right now, which is called, a kind of golden era of consciousness, or a great awakening, a mass awakening, but awakening times. A period of time when we would rapidly shift in our consciousness and really wake up to the truth of who we are. When we would become less identified with ego, the voice of fear in our head that presents itself as the voice of reason. And so tonight we're going to talk a little bit about the ego, because there's never been a greater time to really start to have awareness for your ego and not be ruled by fear. Because the truth is that human beings, we are fear driven. It's kind of the deal of being here, right? I believe in many ways that we are here to have an experience with fear. Fear doesn't necessarily exist everywhere. And to come to reach a point in our lives where we no longer subscribe to fear or feel so driven by fear in such a meaningful way. And instead we start to come to really see fear as something that is there really to teach us, something that is always reflecting to us aspects of our lives that require healing, that require deep inner work, that require change. And I believe that's accelerating for a lot of us right now. And so before I go into the practices and talk about it, I'll just say, if you have been, feeling a certain and sudden kind of elevation, if you've just been noticing that the things that used to bother you or weigh you down just no longer seem to have a weight, you might be going through this. You might really have an opportunity to accelerate your growth right now. And on the same token, you might be in more pain than ever before, because awakening and kind of releasing the grip of fear in our lives, releasing the grip of ego in our lives, is never met without pain. In fact, pain is usually a part of the process. And that pain can come in just having sudden truths, certain things about you or your life or the world that are quickly becoming revealed to you, as is very much happening on the collective right now, for example. You might, just things in your life don't work for you anymore. It might be like a huge purging and release of stuff that's just all coming up for review and wanting to go. And so usually it's a combination of these two things, these kind of moments of elevation where you have shifts in perspective and awareness that things just don't bother you anymore, marked by these kinds of inner turmoil clearing stages and feelings. So if you've been having a feeling that something's shifting within you, perhaps it is. And so that's really what I wanted to leave you with. And of course, I'm going to be sharing more about this in the weeks ahead, and just as a means to offer support and validation. But really, when we go through and we start to experience, and by the way, we're all here to wake up. So everyone on the planet is always somewhere in an awakening journey, okay? That's the deal of what we're here to do, okay? And part of that journey is to come to have awareness for and eventually realign how the ego plays a role in your life. That's the deal that we're all here doing, all at different stages all the time. But I think there's a real opportunity to really grab a hold of this and use it in your life right now. And that really starts with starting to understand and realign the ego. The ego is not meant to run the show, the heart is. The ego is meant to support the heart. But for a long time, and for most of us, the ego, that voice of fear in our head, that worried doubt part of us, runs the show. And so there's never been a greater opportunity for you to really put this back into wholeness, put this back into realignment. So I want to give you 3 practices for really starting to realign your ego. Okay. And so I'm going to just look at my notes here to remind myself. And the first part is you want to recognize. You want to just start to recognize the ego. So let me describe it to you. 99% of the time, that voice of fear in your head that's often presenting itself as the voice of reason, right? It often seems very logical, but inherently it's really coming from a place of fear. That is your ego. It's likely the part of you you're most aligned with. We all are. Like, you don't need to worry about that or feel bad about it. But what you want to do is to start recognizing the ego. Okay. So with recognizing, it's just recognizing. And that takes a little bit of like conscious practice. And sometimes it works better in like bigger things in your life. Like you can see the extremes more, but it's really to start to say, is this coming from a place of love and wholeness and a sense of feeling safe and complete? Or is this innately coming from a place of fear? And if it's coming from a place of fear, it's your ego. Now, again, probably 98% of the time, the kind of stream of consciousness, the thoughts in your head are most likely your ego. So you just want to start recognizing it. And the way to tell, because the ego can seem very logical, very reasonable, the way to tell is if it's coming inherently from a place of fear. If it's coming from a place of fear, it's your ego. So just recognize it. Then second, once you start to just recognize the difference between ego and then what else? There's your higher self. And that's ultimately what you want to align with and grow into and become more of. Okay. So and it's not just binary, but for now we're going to keep it binary. So those two, your higher self. Lower self is your ego. So you want to recognize which you're in and at different moments and times. And then what you want to do is to observe it without judgment. And you want to really practice doing this throughout the day. I've said this before, like set calendar invites is just a way to gut check and go, am I in ego or am I in higher self right now? If I'm feeling anxious, worried, if I'm totally spiraling down, negative thoughts of what a future that hasn't happened yet could behold or could happen, I'm in ego. If I'm in the past, I'm in ego. Okay, get the picture here? And so you just want to observe it without judgment. That's it. Okay, so again, the first one is you want to start to recognize the difference and understand the difference. And then two, you want to make a practice of observing the ego, not identifying with the ego, observing it. And so what do I mean by that? I mean, you want to have a part of you that goes, that's my ego talking right now. Oh, interesting. That's it. And that's the hardest thing to do as well. When you're identified with it, you are like entertaining a story in your mind for like an hour without pause. You don't want to do that. You don't want to go down the rabbit hole. Instead, you just want to pause and observe and go, oh, that's my ego, without feeling, judgment, attachment, all of that. Okay? So again, recognizing the difference and then just start making it a practice to observe it. Every time you're in ego, observe it. Now, technically, if you're observing every time you're in ego, you'd give yourself whiplash because it'd be all day long. But you just want to make a practice, whatever comes naturally and whatever it ends up being, to observe rather than identify with your ego as much as possible. And then third, I want to give you a couple shift out of it tools. So a lot of times, observing and going, that's my ego is enough to shift out. But some of our egos are pretty strong. And so then we'll observe and we'll go right back in. We'll observe and we'll go right back in. So two kind of shift out of it tools that I want to give you as part of this step 3. One is to laugh at it. This is talked a lot about in the book, A Course in Miracles. And it's just a way of like getting the ego like off kilter and off center. And, if you live with people, they might think you're crazy. But like when you're spiraling on some kind of crazy thought down your head, negative fear-based thought, it's just to laugh out loud at it. If that feels too weird, laugh at it in your head. Like do a silent laugh. Like, you're so funny. Oh my God, what are you saying? Okay, so that's one tactic. And then the other one, which is really powerful, is to pause. And again, you can judge whether you do this silently or out loud, depending on who you live with. But then the second one is to say, who's talking? Who's speaking right now? To consciously pause once you observe and to say, who's speaking right now? When you do that, you automatically don't identify with it. Got it? So when you say, who is speaking right now? It is another way of not identifying it, with not identifying with your ego as the primary you that's speaking. You have different aspects. You want to eventually kind of rise out of your ego and into alignment with your true self, your soul. So those are our 3 practices. And again, I would say there's just such a huge opportunity right now. And you're like, why should I be doing this, right? The key is any area of your life where you're challenged, I promise you, it's because you are aligned to fear, better said your ego in that part of your life. That's the truth. So any aspect of your life, anywhere and way you're struggling, it is an alignment to ego, an alignment to fear that is causing your suffering, hands down. And there's just an opportunity to really shift out of ego right now in a way we haven't seen before. And so that's why I'm sharing this and planting some seeds with you right now that I will continue to talk about in the future weeks and months ahead. So that's it. Acknowledge, observe without judgment, and use the shift out tool. Laugh at it or just say, who is talking? As a way to acknowledge it's not your ego, it's not you. Okay? Have a great week. If you need any support, I'm here. If you have any topics you'd like me to speak about or cover, email me. I love that. And that's it. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye for now.